Good afternoon and welcome to our ILC Lunchtime Conversations brought to you by the ILO Future of Work podcast series. We are coming to you from the International Labour Conference here at the Palais des Nations in Geneva. Each day, we explore a key topic shaping the world of work with guests from around the globe who share their insights and their experiences. Today, we're going to focus our conversation on SDG 8, which aim to promote inclusive and sustainable economic growth, full employment, and decent work for all. Progress has been slow and uneven on SDG 8, particularly on social inclusion and decent work. And there is a pressing need to accelerate efforts, especially ahead of the high-level political forum on sustainable development, now in July 2025, and particularly with the World Summit for Social Development in November of this year. I think we all agree that putting job creation and decent work at the center of economic policies is crucial to achieving poverty reduction and building a stronger, more inclusive society. So to discuss all this, we have our four panelists. Thank you very much for being with us today. We have Carmela Torres, who is Undersecretary, Employment and HRD Cluster of the Department of Labor and Employment of the Philippines. Thank you very much, Carmela. We have Luc Triangle, who is Secretary General of the International Trade Union Confederation, ITUC. We have Roberto Suárez Santos, who is Secretary General of the International Organization of Employers. And we have our own Sangheon Lee, who is director of the ILO Employment Policy Department. So we're going to start with the big picture. Sangheon, how is the world perform in terms of SDG 8 progress? Give us the big picture. Also, when we talk about policies to support full and productive employment, does this mean or imply less rights at work? In other words, do rights take a backseat in economic policies?
Thank you. This is really a critical question. Before responding to your question, I have to say it's a great pleasure to be here with Roberto and Luke and Amy. Let's look back a little bit. So 6 years back, we had occasions to review the SDG 8. Probably some of you may remember. At that time, we had mixed stories, mixed development, but there was some hope. If we actually take the accelerated actions, probably we can better deliver on SDG 8. That's what we expect at the time. Now, I must say the result has been overall mixed, but we have more bad news than good news at the moment. So let me tell you a little bit on this. What is SDG? SDG is all about bringing together economic growth and employment and the rights together. So the link is a very important part of SDG. So this is precisely the focus of the ILO Director General's report as well. But from looking at that perspective, I have to say 3-4 things very quickly. Number one, economic growth, probably you are not very satisfied with it, but it's okay. It's around 3%. It's not that bad. And when you look at the working poverty, it's declining. That's another good news. If you look at just the employment figure, we are quite good. So unemployment rate is actually getting back to almost pre-pandemic level. So we are all good on there. But here is the problem then. When we look at the youth and the women, especially in needs rate, we have lots of issues there. So when it comes to especially youth unemployment needs, it's really stayed very high. But there is a more difficult story coming here. If we look at not just the employment, if you look at the economic growth and formal employment or wage employment, we have a real issue. Previously, for each economic growth, 1% economic growth normally creates 0.6% of the informal employment. But now, that ratio is now declines to 0.46 points, 0.46%. So it's quite a decline in that sense. So we have an issue there. Second, as you know very well, labor income share once again start to decline in very recent years. Yeah. We had a bit of a moment of the restoring and recovery, but we are back to a bit of the declining trend. And the productivities, we are not very good at productivity. Overall, it's 1.5% growth. But the problem is the difference between large and the SMEs. As Roberto, you know very well, SMEs are really backbone of the job creation. So productivity actually gap there is a really issue. And more surprisingly, that is why actually Isabella, you mentioned, when it comes to rights, we have, this is quite a bit of surprise. Whatever evidence you're looking at, we start to see the erosion of workers' rights everywhere, especially in the low-income countries. The UN has just released the report on the SDG now. So one of the quick comments actually came up very strongly is that the global average compliance with the fundamental principles of right to work actually declined by 7% between 2019 and 2023. This is a really reflect actually difficult actually difficult actually political situation now. So back to your question, do actual rights take a backseat in economic policies? I can say 100% yes, but there is some growing indication that might be the case. That might be what's happening now.
It's a bit of a mixed picture. Roberto, you already had a report in 2019 that described the progress on SDG as slow and sluggish. From an employer's perspective, has this changed? I mean, does the path to achieve SDG 8 seem increasingly difficult? And what are the main obstacles?
How much I have to explain that?
Not a very long time. So
2 minutes?
Yeah, 2 minutes. Yeah,
2 minutes, 3 minutes. Okay.
I know it's a very difficult question.
The report you're referring to was on 2019. None of us predicted what was going to happen in 2020 and, of course, the geopolitical scenario that we have now. We have been advocating and very clearly expressing that there are elements of hope in terms of economic growth. I think that Sangheon already referred to that. The huge number of people out of poverty is encouraging in many low-income countries. The emerging of middle class in countries like China, like also Brazil, like many also middle-income countries that have also a trend before the 2020 in terms of having more incomes also for individuals due to economic growth. But it's true that the pandemic, for whatever reason, and I'm not going to enter into that, brought us a new scenario. Looking at the figures also, you see that we cannot say that humankind, the world, has failure with the pandemic, because you also can see that there was a recovery path which was very intense in the last years, especially in the last years. Whether we are now right back at the same situation than 2019, well, it's difficult to say. The new element, which is much more worrying from our perspective, and is not surprising, is what's the business environment? What are the elements for an entrepreneur, a small and medium company, a woman that wants to push out its own project, its own business in a developing or a developed economy right now? That has improved or not? That has improved also to these persons to create and preserve jobs. How many days it takes to register, how many days it takes also to have the right talent, also to keep the right talent, also how access to credit, how access to finance is working, is not exactly improving. There is hope in the sense that new technologies are bringing now incredible opportunities for access to credit, for access to finance, for also access to skills and talent. It's also very encouraging to see that even the discussion that we have now in the informal sector, I know that we have still 57% of the total occupied population in the informal sector, but it's very encouraging that many of the new tools, digital tools, can be very, very instrumental to bring more people out of the informal sector, but still the policies are lagging much behind. And when we talk about policies, we say regulations, institutions. Institutions are weak. Corruption is very spread in many countries. Social dialogue is not precisely streamlined. business organizations, workers' organizations are not solid as they should. So all that is lagging behind and needs much more ambition from all of us. That's where we see the main obstacles. That's where we saw the main obstacles. Adding to that, there is a new scenario of trade. We cannot insist more that proper trade integration, what we should, what we used to call globalization, nobody now is using this word
No,
globalization,
not anymore.
brought many opportunities. Brought many opportunities for decent work, many opportunities also for skilling, for innovation, and also for freedom of association, I have to say, if properly channeled. We are losing that, and we are very worried of a scenario of protectionism, of close approach from governments, which is going to have a withdrawn effect, backlash effect, that is not going to benefit anyone.
Luc, we have been mentioning erosions of workers' rights. What is the position, what is your view from ITUC on the progress on SDG 8?
Well, I can only confirm that we are heavily lagging behind in meeting the objectives of SDG 8. We also have, as I2C, our own global indicator on where we stand today with SDG 8, and we are lagging behind. And we even see regression when it's about, for instance, the eradication of child labor, when it's about meeting objectives on youth employment, or when it's about informal employment rising in the world, now almost already 2 billion people in this kind of informal employment. So we are strongly lagging behind. That doesn't mean that we just observe as trade unions. We act. Where we can, we are approaching with our affiliates governments. I'm not going into the details, but for instance, in the Philippines, we have worked with the government on indeed bringing in decent work objectives in their national program. We have done that also in Chad, in Namibia, in Somalia, in Brazil, and in many other countries. But the overall trend is very worrying because decent work, as already previously said, it's also about rights. And what we see is that there is indeed a further decline of workers' rights all over the world. A few days ago, we have launched our Global Rights Index as ITUC, and we see further decline on overall workers' rights and trade union rights. Just to give you a few examples, 87% of the countries make problem on the right to strike. 80% countries don't accept collective bargaining as a tool to make progress. So in that sense, it's not going into the right direction, and we need to name it. That doesn't mean that there are not good examples, but we need to name it, and we need to say we are not on track to meet the objectives of SDG 8. And to conclude, in the DG's report, there was a clear reference to democracy and to democratic values. Well, it goes hand in hand. Where we see a decline on democracy, we see also attacks on democratic values. And democratic values includes indeed also decent work, includes also workers' rights. Those go hand in hand. And in that sense, we have launched, as I2C, more than a year ago, and now even more, our global campaign for democracy, and also for democracy that delivers to workers, because that's the key. We need to have not only democratic elections, but we also need a democratic result that delivers to workers, because that's the key to advance on decent work, to advance on workers' rights.
Thank you, Luc. And now, Carmela, a point of view from the Philippines. As a representative of a member state that will present its voluntary national review to the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development in July 2025, can you give us a sense of what we've been talking about, the progress of SDG 8, from the perspective of the Philippines?
Thank you very much, Isabel. And just to say good afternoon to the esteemed members of the panel. As earlier mentioned by Sangheon, generally there's a slow progress as far as the SDG 8 is concerned. But there's a lot of new developments or good developments from the perspective of the Philippines. If we're talking of economic growth, if we're talking of poverty reduction, if you're talking of employment, economic growth, for example, has increased. The GDP growth has increased from 5.5% to 5.7%. And in an overall Philippine Development Plan, our target is 6.5% of economic growth. So we're very happy and we're very hopeful. Poverty incidence has declined from 13% in 2023, it's now 10%, 10.9%. But our concern is regional disparities exist. So we have to contend with different unequal developments because the Philippines has 17 regions and we have to contend with different status of these different regions from the urban to the rural communities. We have to see all this and see what inequalities exist. Employment landscape is very positive. For the past years, we've been experiencing large, good employment, strong employment growth. In fact, last March 2025, maybe I could boast that we have 3.9 unemployment rate in the country. So we hope that this will continue together with all these different encouraging figures. We're hoping and we're always banking on it's not just employment, it has to be quality employment, it has to be skilled labor. And what we've seen is there's a new a reduction of elementary occupations and more skilled and semi-skilled employment. But on the other hand, we have challenges. Sangheon already mentioned the unemployment of youth. We do suffer from unemployment, particularly for the youth not in employment, education, and training. It's 12.8%. It's quite high. At the same time, we have the informal economy. We have to contend with the informal economy, the lack of decent work, and how we could support and provide social protection, how we can help them become formal. We have vulnerabilities in the country. The Philippines suffers a lot from natural shocks. We have typhoons all the time. We can have as many as 12 to 20 typhoons a year. We can have all these volcanic eruptions, and this affect employment, which can displace workers, can displace businesses. But this is where we have to provide interventions to ensure that those who are displaced are even provided support and also even emergency employment. So this is the general scenario in the country.
So now that we established that things are not as good as we would like them to be, and that we have many challenges, and you've talked about trade, you've talked about climate change, you've talked about democracy. So now what can be done? Sangheon, I'm going to go back to you again for the global picture. The fourth International Conference on Financing for Development is going to take place next month in Sevilla. SDGs require massive financing. So is it going to be more difficult to get the financing necessary to advance SDGs and SDG 8? What's the situation now? Because this is going to have an impact on what we can do.
Yeah, my answer is I'm afraid, yes, it's going to be more difficult. Just thinking about this, I mean, probably you may remember pandemic period. So most of the countries suffered job losses, but in different way. So the country with a strong financial capacity, they found a way of the cushioning against all job losses. But when it comes to the country with a very low level of the finance capacity, they are the one really suffer a lot, tremendous job losses and etc. So we clearly saw from the pandemic, the finance really matters when it comes to this job creation. But in the reverse cases, it's now. We are talking about the job creation potentials in the new sectors, digital, green, and demographic, or you name it. But guess what? All of them requires investment, infrastructure investment, investment in people. So that's all required financial resources, which are most of the developing countries are lacking. So absolutely, in terms of number, we are talking about 982 billions US dollars financing gap to fill or to ensure there is the labor market recovery and job creation. So that's one thing. But it's not just about the how much money you have. It's also about how you spend the money you got. for the job creation. So it's not just about the level or also the how. So there are lots of investment going on right now. The challenge for us is the how can we make sure all this investment will lead to decent job creation, either through private investment or public investment. That's where we need to work a little bit more. For example, there are lots of tools we can do it. The starting point is even though economic investment policies should be job-rich process. So to make it happen, we are considering making budgetary processes job-rich, so we can the employment budgeting, and also the public investment can be also designed to maximize the job impact. And also when we are making investment, the SMEs, for example, we can apply the same logic and the same report as well. So it's a difficult time in terms of the level of resources. We have to do our best to secure the more resources for developing countries. But at the same time, we have to discuss how can we use these limited resources in the way of the maximizing our job impact. So my answer is yes, we have an issue, but we can do a bit more in terms of spending.
We
Thank
can
you.
do a bit more. Luc and then Roberto, kind of the same question. I mean, in the next 5 years, what will be the priorities, the opportunities for achieving SDG? Luc, from the workers' point of view, and then Roberto.
A few points that I certainly would like to raise. First of all, you referred to the Financing for Development Conference. Well, for me, this is the key, because we can have a lot of development goals. If only half of the countries have the means to deliver on that because they have the financial means, then we leave half of the world behind. So the Financing for Development Conference, as ITUC, we hope that we can create the international solidarity to allow developing countries also to invest in development. That's one point. Secondly, we have also the issue, and it was raised by Roberto, of economic growth. Sure, we need to grow further because GDP growth is key for job creation, but they have to be linked, because what we have seen over the last 30 years is that the GDP growth has multiplied by 4 over the last 30 years, but it was not followed by decent job creation. And not just with job creation, but I emphasize really decent job creation. That means also jobs with rights. And we actually saw in the same period over the last 30 years that the labor income share in the GDP has continuously declined. So that means that we create a world, and that's the reality today, of people that have incredible fortunes, wealth, billionaires, where then 50% of the population actually didn't benefit at all of all the GDP that has been created over the last 30 years. So that connection between economic growth, GDP growth, and work and decent work, including also rights, is for us crucial, and we have failed on that over the last 30 years. That's also why so many people are disappointed today in democracy, because democracy didn't deliver for them. And that's why we have today the pressure on democracy. The third point that I would like to raise, it's linked with what's happening now in Sevilla, but that's also other opportunities. We have the SDG 8 review later this year as well. And let's not forget the World Summit for Social Development. Yeah. Well, these are for us, on the short term, not only the next 5 years, absolute priorities on which we need to focus. And for instance, when it's about the social summit, we don't need just another political declaration. We need new targets that can be measured. And for instance, for us, this is about social protection. Half of the people in the world, 3.8 billion, don't have any kind of social protection. Well, the social summit fails if we don't deliver on social protection. We have launched in this house a few months ago, the Living Wage Initiative, supported by IOE, supported by the ITUC, and coordinated by the ILO. Well, also on living wages, we have to deliver. The point has been mentioned about youth unemployment. Well, if we don't deliver a job and prosperity and future for the millions of young people and I'm now focusing only on the African continent, this is a ticking time bomb for the African continent, but for the world. So the objectives need to be focused on those major challenges. And that's what I hope that we can achieve in the next 5 years. Because if we don't achieve those social dimensions, the political agenda, the geopolitical conflicts will not be reduced, they will not decline, they will only increase. So a better world, a more peaceful world, a world which is more calmer than it is today, can only be achieved if we deliver on those basic social demands that we have.
Roberto, I saw you nodding at some of the things that Luc said. What's your perspective from the IOE?
The perspective on what we can do together.
What we can do,
What
how
we
you
can
see
do
the
together.
next 5 years of
How
priorities.
ambitious we can be also to have a strong
The priorities.
priority agenda on SDG 8, which is about economic and social aspect. Do we have a strong skills agenda? Do we have a strong productivity agenda global-wide? You refer to the informal sector and people in the formal sector, 6 out of 10 people. But if you go to business, the figure is even more striking. It's 4 out of 8 of 5 business. We don't call it business. We call it economic units in the informal sector are in informal. If you want to push, as Luke was saying, more share of labor income also for workers, it's imperative to have a strong productivity agenda. I'm not talking about work productivity. I'm talking about investment. The AI reality is here. Digital is here. Connectivity is not there. Still 40% of the population worldwide don't have even access to internet. We're not talking about broadband. Digital illiteracy is still a big challenge. We still have many institutions that are not working. Sorry to say, but regulations are far from what is expected. We are very good doing regulations in many countries, developing countries, but these regulations are not implemented because they are not realistic on all the areas, on all the grounds. So if we want to have a strong productivity skills agenda, we have to put ambitions and courage to see what are the regulations that are not working and how better they can be also framed, and also the policies, including fiscal, trade, labor, and administrative burdens. I also want to say that there is a kind of mindset. I mean, we look very much for business, but also we take a special care for small and medium companies. Whenever we launch an initiative, we all, but especially those who are the ones deciding, politicians, and we need also to think small. How difficult is this regulation, this proposal, to create the environment for a company for creating decent jobs? And that's still not there. This mindset from all of us is far away also from being there. So if we put ambition on that, I am pretty sure that we'll have in the medium term results. Last but not least is partnerships, how we work and collaborate together. In ILO, we know how tripartism work. We have strong relations with the workers, tensions, but very often very difficult conversations. That's not the reality outside. The way we do partnerships, the way we work together for social protection with the different actors, the way we work together for access to health, access to education. The private sector needs to have a better engagement there. And for that, you need also a different mindset in many sense, because we are not yet there in this partnership that will bring the ambition that we need.
Carmela, what is the view from the Philippines? You mentioned before informal work, informal economy. So what strategies is the Ministry of Labor pursuing to formalize jobs and extend social protection coverage to informal workers? And is this your priority?
The informal sector is our priority, of course. And the Department of Labor has implemented a couple of strategies to formalize the informal economy. We've been very strong with policy advocacy and legislative support. There is now a current bill, or we say a proposal to create a Magna Carta for workers in the informal economy, which will look into a very comprehensive approach to how to look at the rights of these people in the informal economy, ensuring social protection, and see how they can be guided to formalization. Another is we've been implementing programs that would help them gain employment even for a short term, especially those groups that are disadvantaged and displaced, and they're being provided emergency employment support and at the same time guide them after to formal employment. We've been implementing comprehensive livelihood programs that will try to boost and empower the workers to give them livelihood and at the same time create small businesses that will make them micro entrepreneurs that will ultimately guide them and lead them to formalization. Currently, we're implementing a comprehensive program which we call the Adjustment Measures Program. This adjustment measures program is helping the micro and small enterprises to improve their systems, look into the productivity, do a lot of capacity building. And one of our priorities is to capacity building, especially in the area of technological developments. As Roberto has mentioned, AI is here. We have to give the micro, small, and medium enterprises the opportunity to learn what AI is and how they could use AI in their small enterprises. And this is one of the areas that we're looking into, see how AI can help them, how see AI would be able to support them, particularly in looking into how they can improve their small businesses, how they can work with other small enterprises to create group enterprises that can help them improve and be formalized in the future.
Thank you very much. This is an essential topic, and we could be talking about this for hours. For my last question, I'm going to ask you to be very brief, 1 minute. What are the most promising strategies for mobilizing stakeholders? Sangheon, I start with you, and then Carmela, and then Luke and Roberto.
Yeah, it is.
1 minute. I know.
Yeah, it is hard to choose one. For me, we are living in a very polarized political environment at the moment. I think it's very important to secure common understanding or the common sense of direction and the goal, especially on the SDGA. This work is all about the reality of the people there. I think there is not much room for political, polarization and disagreement. I think we can build on that. Everybody can agree. Decent job creation should be the main purpose of economic and social policy. Everybody will agree on that. The second relate to that is when we're talking about job creation, job quality cannot be secondary consideration. We are talking about combining growth and structural transformation and upgrading economy and the formalization, all of this. We cannot stay in the low skilled and low paid job, the trap. So I think if we can bring all this together, have a common narrative on the common goal and common purposes and common direction, that will be really excellent actually stepping up sort of board for the mobilizing all different stakeholders together, sitting on the same table, action together.
Thank you, Sangheon. Carmela.
Yes, thank you. We have always been promoting social dialogue and tripartism in all the work that we do, whether it's policy planning, program development, evaluation, and all of this. But tripartism should evolve, and it has evolved in the Philippines because now we're working into what we call a multi-stakeholder approach. That means taking into consideration collaboration that is inclusive, collaboration that will involve not only the workers, the employers, but also the basic sectors, the informal economy, people with disabilities, indigenous peoples, the social sectors, to involve them in the planning and implementation process. And what we have been saying is when the multi-stakeholders are involved, it should be grounded within the principles of transparency, shared responsibility, and collaboration, strong collaboration among each other.
Luc. Your turn.
Well, I would like to emphasize first the important connection between growth, jobs, and rights. They all three are important in creating what we want to do with job creation. So they are at the same level. Growth is not enough if there is no job creation, and job creation is not enough if they are not connected to rights. So all three are equally important. That's one point, and I think we need to continue to work on that nexus between those three. The second point, the overall track record of SDG implementation and achievement is only 17, 18%. Well, we can be extremely pessimist on that, but actually we also can look at it from a positive approach. Look what has been created under this 17, 18%, a lot. And what we need to do is to look to the good examples in a number of countries where we have achieved progress on decent work and in connection to sustainable growth. So I think we need to look to best practice, how this has been achieved. And I think indeed, and I am a strong believer, that social dialogue, collective bargaining, tripartism is key in getting there. And third point, we will continue to do our work as trade unions, be sure. That means that we will continue with our affiliates in the 170 countries where we are represented to work on governments to make indeed SDG 8 into something real, to work on results. That also means that we will continue with our own campaign as ITUC, because we have a campaign, Time for 8. We continue with our own campaign that drives our members in these countries to indeed work with their governments. That also means that we believe that social dialogue and inclusion of the social partners in everything what we do on the SDG and specifically on the SDG 8 steering committee, that our involvement as social partners is important. And last but not least, we have to build coalitions, because it's not only up to us trade unions, it's not only up to companies to deliver on that. This is a societal challenge and a societal objective. So there are more broader organizations that can also assist us in achieving our objectives on SDG 8.
Thank you. And last but not least, Roberto.
The question is how to mobilize better, how to activate stakeholders. I can echo what my colleagues have said before, but I would add something that has perhaps not been said. You need to build trust. Trust is the driver of any efficient partnership. And this trust is not always there. This trust needs a lot of work behind the scenes. It needs better communication on what are the objectives. It needs better language, because sometimes the language we speak is very different. It needs also respect of the rule of law, which is not always there. It needs also respect to institutions. And it needs also a better understanding of what are the interests of each party. If you build on that, you will have much better approach in terms of mobilizing the stakeholders, but also delivering together. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Dialogue, it's what the ILC is all about. So thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much for your very interesting, we could be talking about this for hours. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. That's all for today's episodes. Thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us again for more conversations on key issues shaping the world of work. Please don't forget to follow us on social media for updates and insights, on X at ILO, on Facebook and LinkedIn at International Labour Organization, on Instagram at ILO.org, and YouTube ILO TV. Until next time, take care and goodbye from all of us here at the ILO at the Palais des Nations in Geneva.